As usual, television programs got canceled this year. Most of them were new programs that deserved to be dropped and were, once their abysmal ratings were compiled. Others were old favorites, programs that a generation grew up with. But times change and so do the numbers. The ratings fell and they were canceled.
Be careful on it.
But then there's the Hill Street Blues. Critics praised it as the best dramatic series to come along in years. Yet out of 64 shows included in last week's Nielsen ratings, Hill Street ranked 57th. So NBC killed it, right? Wrong. The show gets another chance in the fall, and that's unusual.
Mama, bless me.
It's very unusual and it's refreshing because NBC has committed themselves to the show, and the affiliates have expressed to NBC their commitment to the show. They're saying even though the ratings are low, stick with it, that they think the audience will find that show and that it'll become a big hit. There have been slow starters before. All in the Family was one, Lou Grant was another. They stuck with those series and it worked. And there are a few other examples. There's not many, but let's hope that Hill Street Blues is one of those.
Quality is difficult to define. One man's steak is another's chopped liver. But evidently NBC network execs are willing to gamble on Hill Street's touch of class. They think it could still turn into a hit. Of course, when your network is number 3, what's there to lose? Ted Brown, Action 4.
Dr. Armand Start is ready to do battle with his opponent, Hugh Long, a retired school principal, for a school board seat. At last April 14th's election, voters elected Long over Start for the District 2 seat of the Oklahoma City Board of Education. Start, the incumbent, lost by 38 votes, but it was discovered some people who voted were ineligible, and so a special election will be held tomorrow. Start says he's ready and has been campaigning very hard. Long has made the same claims. A major issue has been that of organized labor. Start's against it having more power. Long disagrees.
In other words, if the voters turn out tomorrow, 2,000 or 3,000 voters, and they want Mr. Long to represent them, so be it. That's fine with me. That's the people speaking, but not 400. Huh? Those are union people voting against me.
Well, I'm not really pro-organized labor. I'm pro-teacher. Some of my campaign workers and friends are teachers, and if they belong to the union, that doesn't mean that they're villains as far as I'm concerned. But as far as the organization of labor is concerned, I'm not pro-labor at all.
Here's a list of the schools where District 2 voters can cast their ballots tomorrow. Johnson, John Marshall, West Nichols Hills, Burbank, Mayfair, Monroe, Putnam Heights, and Horace Mann. Just who will be sitting in this chair for the next 4 years? Like so many other elections, the kind of voter turnout will decide the outcome. Dr. Start and Mr. Long aren't trying to fool themselves into believing that most of the 12,000 eligible voters will go to the polls, because even the candidates know many people don't take school board elections seriously. Ed Stewart, Action 4 at the School Administration Building.
Oklahoma state law is very strict about how county commissioners handle construction bids. Contractors deliver the sealed bids to an employee of the county clerk's office. The bid is recorded but not opened. All the bids are opened later at a county commissioners meeting. The commissioners are supposed to award the contract to the lowest bidder. But the FBI claims that doesn't always happen. A handful of commissioners across the state have been charged with extorting kickbacks from suppliers. Does that mean that the state law governing the handling of bids isn't strict enough? Oklahoma County District Attorney Bob Macy says no.
It would appear to me that the problem is probably in the enforcement of these statutes. I don't know of any agency that's charged with the responsibility for seeing to it that these provisions are carried out. Now, indirectly, the auditor and inspector, when he audits the county commissioners, looks at these things. If a disgruntled competitor, bidder, makes a complaint, then my office or the Attorney General would make an investigation. But generally speaking, I don't know if there's anyone watching to see to it that these provisions are complied with.
Tulsa County has devised a plan designed to eliminate any questions about competitive bidding practices. District Attorney Macy says he may want to implement such a plan here in Oklahoma County. That's in order to protect future commissioners and the public. Scott Wallace, Action 4 at the Oklahoma County Courthouse.
Meet the Reverend Charles Guth, minister of the Church of the Gospel Ministry. Guth Church has no stained glass windows. It doesn't even have any walls. No pews, no pulpit.
All right.
Guth has services in city parks, but spends most of his time visiting the members of his congregation, the street people of downtown Oklahoma City. Like the auto workers at the General Motors plant, Guth is a rather unorthodox minister. His ministry is like several other missions and outreach programs in the city that have a different definition of church and religion. That raises the question, what is the purpose of a ministry like Guth's? You do not do this for tax purposes?
I do not, absolutely not. My books are open to anyone who will request it in writing.
Why do you do this?
Because I love God and I love these people, no matter who they are, no matter what they are. I love them in Jesus' name, just as they are.
Guth says he is sickened that someone would use the name of God to avoid paying taxes. Whether that is what the GM auto workers are actually doing is up to the IRS. Nevertheless, Guth says he's interested in souls, not taxes. Larry Audis, Action 4.
Many of Oklahoma City's senior citizens are able to ride a bus free of charge through a program sponsored by the Salvation Army and financed by CETA. But the CETA money runs out June 30th, and the Salvation Army says it will not have enough money to keep the buses going. The buses would transport these citizens from one location to another, whether it be a doctor's office or to a place of recreation, and they say unless some financial aid comes their way, they will be devastated without a bus.
Without the bus, we don't do nothing. We're lost.
I don't know what we would do, especially when we need to go to the doctors and go to the grocery store. We don't have no way.
If they stop, it'll be, I don't know what I'm going to do.
I have to go to chemotherapy at the medical building every week, and I don't have a car and don't have any way to get there.
Well, if crying would help, I'd sit down and cry.
Right now, a number of volunteers have been manning the buses, but the Salvation Army says it needs full-time bus drivers. Time is running out on the CETA contract, and it makes the elderly and the people at the Salvation Army feel helpless.
A year ago, when we made up our budget, we didn't realize that, it's not going to hurt the elderly. And then, wham, June 30th, our CETA program stops, and we lose 10 drivers.
One thing elderly people fear is isolation, and they feel if the buses stop running, they will be isolated. They're already faced with other government cutbacks like Social Security, and so the elderly are not feeling very secure right now.
We have tripled our numbers in elective office as women over the last 10 years. If we keep up that pace, I believe we will have achieved our goal to make women full equals in the process for which the Women's Political Caucus was formed. But politics are the last bastion of real male power in this country. So, of course, the battle will be tough, but that's why we're here.
Most people have time off on Memorial Weekend, but for the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, the weekend means hard work. About 10 officers are keeping watch on traffic in the Oklahoma City area, but today the black and white patrol units are not alone. Frank Lane is one of 3 officers who usually spends his time giving driving examinations. But when emergencies come up or there's plenty of holiday traffic, Frank joins the ranks as a traveling trooper, and that's a nice change of pace for him.
It's quite a bit different in that the people out here that you usually come in contact are either broke down or are violators. The people I normally deal with, we're giving them a service and testing them for their driver's license.
Frank and some of the other officers say that they sometimes get tired of being the bad guy when an unhappy motorist is stopped for speeding. But they say they remind themselves that it's their jobs to slow people down, and on holiday weekends like this, it could save a life. Jane Boone, Action 4 on I-35.
The Coast Guard Auxiliary came out to area lakes today, helping lake rangers keep an eye on hundreds of boaters. Here at Lake Hefner, there were 300 boats on the lake by early afternoon, with more constantly getting in on the fun. And it was up to the Coast Guard and lake rangers to make sure the fun is safe. Officials mainly check for life jackets and other safety devices. But they always go up against one real threat officials have little control over, especially on holidays.
Quite a bit of it, of course, is alcohol stimulated. That's a lot of the problems. Of course, there's no licensing of boat operators in this state, and and then of course there's alcohol. And of course, alcohol we have all over the world. That's a problem everywhere.
Ed Stewart, Action 4 at Lake Hefner.
Last couple of days
It was this morning that Senate President Marvin York said in his press conference, time is running out, we cannot reach agreement, and so the controversial school funding bill will have to be dropped for this year.
It is our position that we will postpone any further consideration for this session, House Bill 1396, and instead come with a modified version of House Bill 1236, and we will get to work on that bill sometime probably today and put it into final form and hopefully pass it either the latter part of this week if we can or the first of next week.
Later, at a news conference for the governor, he said he had no choice but to reject the lawmakers' last offer, even if he could have gotten what he wanted in terms of a water development plan.
Well, your analysis is exactly correct. I had an opportunity to get a portion of my water plan if I would agree to their suggested education plan. Looking at it as a package, although I'm very deeply concerned about water, it was not a package I could accept. And therefore, it's just those are the rules of the game. You just win a few, lose a few, some are rained out. But in this case, to get the water and the 20% fund, where I'd asked for 33% and only to get 20% in turn to accept an education bill that I think is very confusing, was not a package that I could accept.
So that particular education bill is dead for this year. The water plan, probably dead for this year. All because of a legislative process in which the leaders got bogged down and couldn't agree on anything. And with that in mind, it makes one wonder how anything gets passed at the Capitol. Bella Shaw, Action 4 at the State Capitol.
The Oklahoma State Fair is one of the top 10 fairs in the country. Each year, hundreds of thousands of people visit the fair carnival. Those big crowds mean big bucks for the fair and Oklahoma City. The same carnival operator has had the fair contract for years. Some other carnival operators don't think that's fair, since the contract has been let without competitive bidding. Gene Soros represents one carnival operator who would like to bid on the State Fair Carnival. Soros met with 3 city councilmen today to try to convince them to allow competitive bidding for carnival contracts.
And I think the city should get involved in it again. They should know what they're entitled to, run a good operation, and have a competitive, at least a 3-bid system. At least 3 bids, above the board dealing. And I'm here to see that that happens. I'm not saying I'll get the best bid or I'll get the contract, but I've got a man that has a carnival that should at least have an opportunity to do that.
After the meeting, Councilman Jack Cornett said he plans to look into Soros' suggestion.
In the next few days, I intend to contact some other state fairs across the United States, see what their policies are towards this. And this will be brought out at the meeting of next Wednesday on the Fair Board meeting.
Soros says he'll let the councilman he spoke with today investigate the carnival contract for the next couple of weeks. Then he'll be back in Oklahoma City to present his case before the full city council. Scott Wallace, Action 4 at the State Fairgrounds.
Lawmen in Blaine County say crime used to be something only the city folk down in Oklahoma City had to worry about.
Blaine County Sheriff's.
But now crime is calling on the rural county residents as well. Actually, the calls are coming into the Blaine County Sheriff's dispatcher in Watonga. She's taking an increasing number of complaints from victims of thefts and burglaries. Like a lot of county sheriffs, the Blaine County Sheriff spends a lot of his time tracking down oil field theft. A theft from a location like this could easily net $15,000 to $20,000. Since it's a rural crime, it's hard to solve. The sheriff says thieves are stealing drill bits, tongs, pipes, meters, and valves, and some of those criminals coming from Oklahoma City.
They may think maybe they think it's easier out here. We don't have all the manpower that they have in the bigger cities. We're short on manpower and that, money to to patrol and stuff like this.
How big of an area do you and your men cover?
1,200 square mile.
How many men?
4 men, counting myself.
Can 4 men possibly cover this rig and all the others in this county effectively?
No, sir. No, sir. Sure can.
The big crime in rural counties is oil field theft, a crime small sheriff's departments cannot keep up with, showing that crime is no longer just for the city. Larry Otis, Action 4 in Watonga.
Tulsa police were called to the Southern Hills Country Club shortly before 5 p.m. last night. They found computer magnate Roger Wheeler slumped over the steering wheel of his Cadillac. Witnesses say 2 unidentified gunmen pumped a couple of shots into Wheeler's head from a close range. The men reportedly sped from the scene in a mid-sized Pontiac. Authorities blocked off the area while detectives swarmed over the scene. They left Wheeler's body in his car for 3 hours as they searched for clues. Today, Tulsa police formed an 11-man task force to investigate the shooting. The force is currently concentrating its efforts on finding the getaway car. Authorities say they have a partial license tag on the vehicle. Meanwhile, the big question is, why was Robert Wheeler killed? Investigators say they're examining all possibilities, including assassination, armed robbery, and attempted kidnapping. Some people have speculated that perhaps Wheeler's death is somehow related to his ownership of a string of highlight clubs. Authorities say they intend to check out any possible organized crime connection.
Anyone that's involved in anything where there is some gambling automatically draws some of the stigma of quote-unquote organized crime. I personally don't feel that way. I mean, I think that there are many, many honest businessmen involved in ventures that involve gambling and, out-of-state interest.
Tulsa police say their next move is to question friends and business associates of Roger Wheeler to try to figure out why someone would want to kill him. But as of right now, there are still no motives and no suspects in the case. Scott Wallace, Action 4 in Tulsa.
In days gone by, the rage was the pinball machine. But pinball wizardry has given way to electronic games like Asteroids and the now famous Space Invaders. But now those 2 games are being challenged by what appears to be a new video king, Pac-Man. Pac-Man looks like a pie with a slice missing. He's hungry enough, eating rows of dots and scoring points in the process. Controlled by one hand knob, Pac-Man weaves through a maze, eating dots, but more importantly, avoiding 4 ghouls: Blinky, Pinky, Inky, and Clyde, who try to eat him. Pac-Man's only salvation is eating one of 4 big dots, or energizers. When he swallows an energizer, the tables are turned, and Pac-Man chases the ghouls, but daring to chew up the little rascals only when their color turns to blue. As you might expect, though, the hungry little dot eater eventually gives way to Pinky, Blinky, Inky, and Clyde. And like all good things, Pac-Man comes to an end.
Waiting at an airport can get pretty boring, but Tina and Russell Dickens would have gladly stayed there all night. Their brother Mike was a petty officer on board the aircraft carrier Nimitz when the accident took place last week.
We've been waiting 4 years for him to get out, and that would have been, if he hadn't come back, that would have been, just shattered the whole dream of him coming home.
Tina said she had imagined her brother being carried out on a stretcher, but those worries ended last night when Mike walked into the terminal.
biggest thing was the shock of when the casualties actually came down. Our mess halls was turned into a hospital. They would bring down the casualties on the elevators, put them on the tables, and administer first aid there. And it wasn't a pretty sight. It wasn't a pretty sight at all.
The Dickens loaded up and headed out. Mike has finished his tour of duty and is out of the Navy. He said he finally felt safe because there wouldn't be any airplanes flying into his home. Bill Ross, Action 4, Will Rogers Airport.
These computers will compile over $3 billion worth of tax information this year. Most major businesses rely on computer technology to handle the tons of paperwork involved in running a big operation. But to the Tax Commission, these computers are relatively new. For years, the state legislature ignored the needs of the commission, and as a result, much of the work is still done by hand. And the pay for the dozens of employees to do the work has been traditionally low. So the Tax Commission has been plagued with poor equipment, poor pay, and poor politics.
Tax has been a focal point, not just in Oklahoma, but nationally. Proposition 13 really brought it to a peak at the national scene. We've had a lot of major revisions to tax laws in Oklahoma in the last 3 years, probably as much as in the previous 10. And all of this is coming at a time when we're undergoing some real growing problems and some reorganization problems as a result of the study we had in 1978. And correlating these two together has been somewhat difficult, particularly in the political arena.
This is an example of some of the modern equipment at the Tax Commission, but it may be some time before the whole department has equipment like this. In the meantime, even Tax Commission Chairman Jim Walker is thinking about leaving his post. If he does, it may present a whole new set of problems for the Tax Commission. Bella Shaw, Action 4.
A viewer writes in and says, I remember my grandfather making out a will. He told me that I would get his house and 8.5 acres when he died. Upon his death, his brother said no will existed, so I received nothing. I checked at the courthouse but couldn't find a will on file there. The attorney that made out the will died a short time ago. Is there anything I can do? Well, unless you can locate the original will or a copy of it, there's little that you can do. And even if you locate a copy, the procedure for having a copy of a will admitted to probate is more difficult than having the original will admitted to probate. If no will can be found, there is a presumption that your grandfather changed his mind and revoked his will by destroying it. This shows the importance of seeing that the right person will know where to locate your will upon your death. For Action 4, this is Ray Vaughn with Legal Briefs.